A well-known soccer player expected to appear at Tembisa Magistrate's Court today following a collision between his car and another vehicle. A 9-year-old child died in the crash that took place yesterday. And I must warn you, there's an incredibly unnerving video of the incident making the rounds on social media. I think it should be accompanied by a graphic warning, given just how devastating what took place there seems to have been. But let's make sense of the extent to which campaigns in this country around safe driving are working. And for that, we bring in the founder and director of South Africans Against Drunk Driving, Caro Smit, joining us via our video link. And Caro, thanks very much indeed for making time to speak to us. Really do appreciate it. I'm actually at a loss for words. I'm not sure if you were able to see the last moments leading up to that incident, and the circumstances around that incident are so incredibly heartbreaking, especially when you think of how avoidable all of this is.
Absolutely. Terrible. And, you know, the thing that we've got to remember, this is only one of 35 incidents that happen like that every single day in South Africa. We have absolute road carnage on our roads. And what is really so sad for me is that there are solutions. There are evidence-based solutions that we can stop this. And yet we're not using them. We're not testing enough for alcohol. We haven't lowered our speeds. Once someone is caught, there are no consequences. They don't go to court. They don't lose licenses. If they kill, they don't go to jail. So just think of that little girl's family, totally traumatized for life. Their life has changed. And for all the 35 others, and, you know, where's the outrage? Where is the anger? Why are we accepting it? You know, we lose 18 other people in a town. It's discussed for weeks. We lose people in mines. It's discussed. People die in buildings. It's all absolutely tragic. But yet we are prepared in South Africa to accept 35 deaths a day. Why are we prepared to do that? It's not fair. It throws families into trauma. It throws families into poverty or further into poverty. And that's not acceptable.
Yeah, I actually can't even begin to think about what this poor woman might be going through, given just how devastating this must be for her and her family. But you speak about outrage, Caro, and I was hoping to engage you about the general drinking culture in this country and how accepting we are of people just in casual conversations driving after having a drink or two. Because what some people have suggested is that it's one thing to have the laws in place and to police whether the laws are being followed. It's another, though, to get people to actually adhere to the laws because society has made it clear that that is the expectation.
Yes and no. You know, Australia had the same number of deaths as us many years ago, and what they did was they tested. If people were caught, they lost their licenses, they got big fines. And so now in Australia, the deaths have gone down from 10,000 to about 1,000 a year. And if you are at a dinner party in Australia and you try and drive after having alcohol, your friends say, "What on earth are you doing? That is disgusting. You may not do it. You will get a criminal record, but apart from that, you could kill yourself or you could kill others." So the thing is, behavior only changes if people are scared of the financial and legal implications of their act. Nothing else. You can't say to people, please drive carefully, please don't drink and drive, because they'll carry on doing it. So the only thing that we've got to do, we've got to test, enforce, as we say, penalties, remove licenses, and come down really hard. And it's not just drinking and driving. You can think about it. It's teenagers drinking, who are not allowed to be drinking, and they're drinking, and domestic violence. So alcohol is behind so many ills in South Africa, and yet we're not doing enough about it. There's too much glamour for it, and Yeah, we've got to stop it.
Yeah, our consumption per capita amongst the highest in the world, we're told, and that's been the case
Yeah.
for a number of years. So, Caro, you're essentially saying that, you know, the gaps here lie in our legislation, if I'm understanding you correctly. And I seem to remember an instance where, okay, you'll correct me on that, but I remember an instance where there were amendments, I think it was to the Auto Act, that were being brought forward, and there was an incredible debate around that, and I can't seem to recall where that ended.
Yeah, so our legislation is some of the best in the world.
Right.
Our blood alcohol levels are perfect, except for the fact that novice drivers, so whether a person is 18 or 40, the first year they drive, they should have zero alcohol in their blood. That is what is best practice. So we need to change that in our legislation. But our legislation is very, very good. All of our legislation is good. What is not good is the enforcement and implementing of the laws.
Right.
And, you know, people get away with it the law says you may not drive a vehicle under the influence of an intoxicating substance or drug. That's one. So even if you've had one tot of tequila, say, and you have a crash, you could be found guilty of driving under the influence. But in South Africa, we tend to go more on that your blood level cannot be above this, or your breath level cannot be above that. But we need to go back to the whole thing about drinking, then driving, as is the main charge in Section 65 of the National Road Traffic Act, should be implemented and used.
Sure. You know, there is, I think, an understandable emphasis on the laws, but I think we should also spend time on just reflecting on the incredible human cost. You know, if people aren't moved by what is morally acceptable, or what at least the moral standard should be, hopefully they are moved by just how much of a stain, if not a completely deep scar, this leaves on families who are affected. I mean, you and I have already spoken about this woman who's lost her child, but there were witnesses who saw what happened. Goodness knows how long it's going to take them to also recover from what they were able to see there.
Absolutely. And this here is the face of my child who was killed by a driver who'd been drinking. And our family has been totally torn apart.
Oh.
And that was 20 years ago, and our family is altered forever. And remember, I am one of the 35 who experienced that trauma. So, you know, people are traumatized for a short time and then they forget about it. They feel sorry for their accused, shame, you know, that could have happened to me, or I was lucky I got away with it. So all those sort of feelings. And the whole thing is that drunk driving is not an accident. It's a choice. And it's a very selfish choice to make. You could kill yourself. Or the other thing is, a lot of young people, what they do is they paralyze themselves, and then their families have the trauma of losing that person because now maybe they're brain damaged, but they also have to look after them. And so the trauma goes on forever. And, you know, so I think in South Africa, people say, oh, it's God's will the person died. Oh, it's Allah's will. It's not. These are preventable deaths and injuries, and they are only prevented by the government coming down very, very hard on people who speed, on people who drink and drive, on people who don't wear seatbelts. I mean, if you look at the number of crashes in South Africa where they say the car rolled over, people were picked up all over the veld. Because they're not buckled up. The safest place for you to be in a vehicle is buckled up. So we need to come down really hard on every single thing that helps. If people drive through stop streets, they should be fined. They go through red robots, they should be fined. Overtake on a blind rise, fined. And all these, you know, if auto is implemented properly and you lose points, it works very well in first world countries. But here, look how many people are driving around without licenses at all. So if they're not even scared of that. How scared are people going to be that I've got 5 bad points against me, because who's checking my license? Yeah. So we don't need auto in South Africa. We need enforcements of our very, very good laws.
Absolutely. And you say that, you know, your child's accident was 20 years ago. People who haven't been grief-stricken don't know that I'm sure you remember that day as clearly as if it was yesterday.
I do. I remember him lying there with 3 rivers of blood going, and just the trauma. My husband was a trauma doctor. He's never been able to step into a trauma unit since then, because he was there. We were there with my child. So yeah, these things, and you have flashbacks for years, and so all these people, that mother, we heard her. That pain will go on forever and ever. And people say time heals. It doesn't really. It doesn't.
Sure. Yeah. All right, Caro Smit, thanks very much indeed for sharing your story. Hopefully, this in some ways helps really drive home the message at the very least. If your morality and doing the right thing isn't enough, hopefully your stories, and now sadly the story of this woman from yesterday, will help people shift the dial and ultimately change their behavior. Caro Smit is the founder and director of the South Africans Against Drunk Driving organization, as we reflect on that harrowing accident that took place yesterday. The soccer star, or the soccer player who was involved in that, is appearing in court. Hopefully we'll get you a whole lot more information around how all of that unfolds.